Welcome to Exploring Church Documents, Episode 1, Evangelii Gaudium by Pope Francis, his first apostolic exhortation. I found this document to be amazing, and it's very long when you look at it. You can download it online, but you also can buy the book and read it in a book form, and you'll notice that it is very long. So I'm only going to be referencing the first 3 chapters because I feel that's really what addresses what I'd like to address, which is the joy of the gospel and missionary discipleship and how they are tied together. So let's get started. In the introduction, which is quite filled with beautiful gems of quotes that we can use, the first one being in number 1, paragraph 1, the joy of the gospel fills the hearts and the lives of all who encounter Jesus. And I think that was an appropriate way to begin because really that sums up the whole document. Is we're looking at when we encounter Christ, we find that joy, and then that proclamation just goes from there. And so it's very uplifting to see just right off the bat, we know exactly what we're looking at. In the first section, of this beginning of this intro. It's called A Joy Ever New, a Joy Which is Shared. And I think, again, very appropriate because when we have that kind of joy of life in anything that we have, we always want it to be shared. And we want to make sure that people can connect to it or attach to it. Example I always love to give is when a woman is engaged and receives an engagement ring, she doesn't rush and hide it in a drawer for safekeeping. She walks around, like this, making sure everyone sees her ring because she wants to share that joyous news. And so it's very much the same when we have these encounters and we meet Christ. We want everybody to know Christ. And so we put it out there. God's voice is lost in lives focused on ourselves. I saw a great meme just the other day with a cartoon of a person and water kind of falling on their head and being taken into them, and then the person next to them already filled, meaning that God can't enter into our lives if we're too full of ourselves. If our ego is what's filling us and taking care of our own needs is what's filling us, then we don't leave room for God. And so really God's voice often gets lost in our lives. And so we're invited to this personal encounter with Christ. Everyone is invited. This is not just for Catholics. It's not just for Christians. It's not just for, the good or the people that go to Mass every Sunday or whatever. Everyone is invited into encounter because once they receive that encounter, then we continue the church. Hebrew scripture is filled with images of joy at the coming of the Messiah. And so that's really what we focus on as well at the second coming. That we understand the gospel, we understand the message of Christ and the resurrection and the second coming. And so we live with joy and hope with that. He refers to, I love the way the imagery that's used here. Some people live lives of Lent without Easter. And we can't do that. We can't be stuck in I don't want to say solemnity, but in the sadness that many times can come through Lent, the heaviness, without having that expectation of Easter joy following and coming next. And so it's really a point of making sure that we always return to that joy. Section 2 in the introduction is titled The Delightful and Comforting Joy of Evangelization, because it really is. It's something joyous that we feel. As evangelizers, we have to be joyful, and that joy is a comfort because we know that there is something hopeful, something to look forward to, and so that joy carries us over. And so it becomes then a comfort to us to have that joy always and know how we are existing within it. And it brings us an eternal newness that every day isn't exactly the same when we wake up in the morning, that God has some adventure planned for us each day, something for us to see or hear or feel that is going to bring us closer in our encounter with Christ. And so every morning we arise with a new thought. Now, that does not mean we forget the past. It just means that we don't let the past hold us down, especially if it's a past of something that is hard or negative or traumatic, that we rise to find the hope and the joy so that we can continue moving forward. And then finally, the third little part to this introduction, the new evangelization for the transmission of the faith. I feel very blessed that I was a part of the I was a part of the new evangelization. We first started talking about it with St. Pope John Paul II back in the early 90s. I remember going to World Youth Day in Denver, Colorado, where he talked about the new evangelization and reading up on it from right before and after. And the new evangelization speaks to us about sharing our faith, but not only in the old definition of missionary, which was going out to places that were far away, other countries, people that didn't know God, and then bringing Jesus to them, but that really it's a missionary outreach to everyone around us, at work, at home, in our social interactions, everywhere we go, it has to come to that. And so then we leap into chapter 1, which is the church's missionary transformation. And where he really talks about evangelization is the mandate. It's the mandate of go and make disciples. Now, again, I was a part of this new movement, quote unquote, of the new evangelization back in the early 90s. And I remember everybody wanted to form a group or an evangelization committee or an evangelization office. And in reality, evangelization was meant to be about how we do what we do, not a whole new thing. As lectors, we evangelize. As catechists, we evangelize. As ministers of extraordinary ministers of communion, we evangelize. As St. Vincent de Paul, or any kind of homeless help that we do, whether it be food or shelter, we evangelize. So it's looking at how we do what we do, and are we sharing the gospel joy as we live out what we live out. So, part 1 of chapter 1, A Church Which Goes Forth, talks about exactly that. That we're not just called to be disciples, we're called to be missionary disciples. We're called to go out and not just sit and wait. We cannot be a Field of Dreams church. If we build it, they will come. I know that's a misquote. I've never seen the movie, but I know the misquote where we say, if you build it, they will come. That's not the type of church we're meant to be. Here's the church, the door's open. If they come in, we'll accept them. If they don't come in, well, they must not have wanted to be here. So, no, that's not us. We need to go out and preach to all places, on all occasions, without hesitation, reluctance, or fear. And that's in number 23 of this document. No one can be excluded. We don't have the right to judge and decide who gets to hear the gospel message. It's for everyone. And we need to take that first step to be involved and to support and to bear fruit and to rejoice. And again, that comes from the book beginning on number 24, where it talks about what is an evangelizing community. And that's a new word for us. We talk about evangelization or evangelizers, but being an evangelizing community, a community that continually shares the joy of the gospel. And I love number 24 in this document because it specifically states what an evangelizing community should look like. So I'm going to go through those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points really quick. An evangelizing community knows that the Lord has taken the initiative, that it's not about me. It's not about how good I am, how many sins I haven't committed. It's not about any of that. It's about the Lord being open with us and opening his arms to meet him. He calls us. We are called. Through our baptism, we begin that journey, and we are constantly being called to something. But it comes from the Lord. It comes from the Spirit. An evangelizing community gets involved in word and deed in people's daily life. So much of that one little phrase. Gets involved. That doesn't just mean we sit by and watch, but we truly accompany others, that we're intimate with people's lives. We're connected to people in our community. In word, in how we speak and how we talk about the gospel, how we read scripture, everything about word, but also in deed, in our actions. If somebody is speaking and trying to evangelize a community, and then they see them, out in the quote unquote real world, doing secular things that are contrary to the church beliefs, that person is not truly an evangelizer. And so we need to walk the walk and talk the talk. We need to do the two. So it's got to be word and deed in people's daily lives. I think secularly, we're all taught to mind our own business, to just look at ourselves. And in a way that is true. We don't judge other people, but we need to be ready to accompany other people, to truly walk with them on their journey. And that means, I know, weird, talking to them, asking them truly, how are you? How is life going for you? And not expecting just to hear, I'm good, how about you? But really to sit down with people and say, hey, how are you doing? Is there something that I can help you with? Or do you need, anytime you need an ear, I'm right here. Okay? Really being involved in people's lives has got to be what an evangelizing community will do. 3, an evangelizing community is supportive, accompanying people. We are supportive, accompanying people. And just like what I said before, that we truly walk together, that we truly care about others. This is a good time to think about that now as we're getting ready for Lent, where your catechumens will be introduced to your parish as elect, the ones that will receive the sacraments at Easter Vigil, the adults mostly, but some children and young people. The people are fully unbaptized people, fully received into the church at Easter Vigil. Do you know who they are year to year? And you might say, well, I don't go to the Mass where they do that, where they present them and have the dismissals on. I don't go to Easter Vigil. It doesn't matter. If we're a supportive, accompanying community, then we need to know who our catechumens / elect, and then when they finally receive their sacraments, neophytes are, because they're now part of our community. Do we know the names of the children baptized and say a little prayer for them at our parish? Okay, how are we supportive of people in the parish? An evangelizing community is concerned with fruit, with being fruitful, not concerned about being successful, not like, oh, we have, 35 more people in our religious ed program than last year. Okay, that's great. But how many of those families are connecting to the parish? How many of your school families are involved in the parish? How many of those adults coming through the initiation process through OCIA are involved with the community, or at least connected to somebody in the community? How many people in your community are active in some kind of ministry? They don't all have to be active in a ministry, but the ones that are, is that number growing? Or is it the same 6 people that do everything? Those are the fruits we're looking for. How are people active and excited about our parish community? They don't have to be in a ministry, but do they come on Sunday excited and happy to see other people? Okay, so how do we bear fruit? And then finally, an evangelizing community is filled with joy. Again, we're not Lent without Easter. We might have times of Lent, but there's always a joy that's within us. Section 2 of this section talks about pastoral activity and conversion, that we are called to a permanent state of conversion. Conversion isn't just an experience, it's a lifetime, that we're constantly growing. And as we grow and we renew ourselves, then we find that missionary impulse. We get excited about sharing the gospel and we feel moved to share a little bit more. Number 33 says, pastoral ministry in a missionary key seeks to abandon the complacent attitude that says, we've always done it this way. That is like death to a parish. When a new idea comes in and instead of thinking about it or discerning it, the response is, but we've always done it this way. This is what we've always done. Well, that's okay. Church is an organism that's meant to grow. And so we need to be open to that. We can't fall into complacency and just take out what we did last year, dust it off, and do it again. Some things, our traditions are wonderful, and some things can be carried through. But we can't just block out any other new ideas or any other new ways of evangelizing without thinking them through. We can't just decide we've grown this far, we're done. We don't need to grow anymore. We need to be bold and creative, walk together as a community led by our bishops. And that's what we're called to do. And then section 3, from the heart of the gospel. We live in an age of instant communication and sometimes biased media coverage. This was written in 2013, I believe, end of 2013. And already talking about our biased media coverage and instant communication. And look at where we are now today with so much social media and things out there where our message runs a risk of being distorted or changed. How many influencers do we have on TikTok who are Catholic but are sharing things that are not necessarily church teaching, but their own traditions, but they're teaching it as if it's church teaching, which that's fine for them, to share how they express their faith. But then other people who are new to the faith are looking at that and going, oh, is that what it means to be Catholic, like to all people? And it's not. And so we need to be careful with that, and make sure that what is being shared is true to what the church believes. We need a goal where we reach everyone without exception or exclusion, and that the message does not become watered down. There's some people that think, oh, when you try to teach to children or you teach in a different way, you're watering down the message. And we have to be careful with that and always remain true to what the preachings of Christ are. And Section 4, a mission embodied within human limits, basically, again, restates that as a church, we are missionary disciples. That's what we're called to do. And everything that we teach, we need to reflect in our own lives. And so we need to be living what we teach once again. And then the last section, 5, is a mother with an open heart. The church is always called to be the house of the Father with the doors wide open. And we frequently try to be the arbitrators of grace rather than facilitators. And there is how would we say, a way of becoming gatekeepers to the sacraments when we start to program things too much, and do the old, well, if you miss 3 classes, you have to start over, you have to do a makeup class, instead of focusing not only on the catechesis, because I'm not saying catechesis is bad, focus on the catechesis as well as accompany them in the journey. Rather than say, well, sorry, you missed 3 classes, you have to start all over again next year. Then it becomes more of a program instead of an accompaniment. And so really working with people. Again, that's not to say we can't have rules and guidelines. We do need them, but we also need to be flexible and pastoral in how we exercise those, so we make sure we don't become arbitrators of grace. And I get the phone calls here in my office, I people saying, well, my parish, they said, if I don't do blah, 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 my children can't receive First Communion, and so how do we, sorry, my phone's ringing, how do we deal with that? How do we work with people in a pastoral sense to be evangelizing, not gatekeeping? We are called to feed the hungry, whether that be physical hunger, spiritual hunger. That's what we're called to do. We're not called to decide who deserves it and who doesn't. We're called to feed. Chapter 2 is titled Amid the Crisis of Communal Commitment. And I'm just going to do a brief, in this section, just a brief synopsis. So section 1 in chapter 2 talks about some challenges of today's world, and I found these to be very accurate still, that we need to say no to an economy of exclusion, where we have a world where we're separated between the powerful and the weak, or the rich and the poor, or the haves and the haves not, or however you want to mention it. There should not be those lines in church. We are all one. We are all one body, and we cannot be exclusive. The next one is that we say no to the idolatry of money. And that's a difficult one because money is really an important part of our lives these days. We cannot survive without it, literally. There's no barter system or things like that for food anymore. And so we really do need to be good stewards of the money that we have. But we also have to be careful that we don't make money our idol, that it becomes our everything. And it's more important to make money than it is to have a spiritual journey with Christ. That's got to be something we watch out for, and we be very careful. We need to say no to a financial system that rules rather than serves. And that's a hard one, but we are called to serve. We're called to feed. We're called to clothe. And many times people will say, well, this is my money. I earned it. You're right. You did. But we also still need to be conscious of those who have nothing and who may be in need. Now, I'm not saying you have to give to every single person that asks you for money. We have to discern how best to share what we have. Whatever we give to our parish on Sunday at the collection, as well as now and then when you see someone that you just know is in need of help, is in true need of money or of food, and we buy food. Or maybe we donate through organizations like our own parish or Catholic Charities. However we're able to do that, we're called to serve and not make money be a ruling aspect, but instead that puts us above other people and look down on those who do not have, but instead use what we have to serve others. And then finally, no to the inequality which spawns violence. And we know that we have a lot of violence in our world, especially in the last couple of years. And we really need to work toward a society, or at least a community, where that does not take over, that we do not spawn more violence, that we learn ways of peaceful ways to change the situation of our lives. Section 2 in chapter 2 talks about the temptations faced by pastoral workers, and I found these really interesting. We need to say yes to the challenge of a missionary spirituality, even though it's countercultural. And we, as ministers of Christ, those of us who are, well, all of us as missionary disciples, need to say, need to be able to say yes to a missionary discipleship where we move forward and we go against what our society is teaching us to do. We say no to selfishness, and I love this term, spiritual sloth, where we just don't want to do anymore. We're tired, we're done, whatever happens, happens. But no, we can't just be complacent. In the old days, back when I did youth ministry back in the early 90s, we used to do this whole campaign called Don't Be a Pew Potato instead of a couch potato. Don't just come to church and just sit there, but find ways to live your faith. This also talking about selfishness. We are living in a time and in a society of narcissism where it's all about me. As long as I'm good with it and it's doing good for me, that's all that I need to know. It doesn't matter how it affects anyone else. And so we need to get out of that. No to sterile pessimism. We can't just be pessimistic. And here's where I love the line: we have to stop being a sourpuss. We have to have a joyful attitude, not just a fake smile, but really a joyful attitude and not be sad all the time. Yes to new relationships spot on by Christ, close relationships and friendships within our community that are based on or strongly connected to our faith journey so that we walk with one another. No to spiritual worldliness, all the stuff out there that's telling us what we need to buy, what we need to be, how we need to dress. And no to warring among ourselves. We are one community, one people. We should not be fighting against one another. We should not be saying my prayer group is better than your prayer group or things like that, where we really truly build a united community. And then finally, we have chapter 3, where we talk about the proclamation of the gospel, that the entire people of God is called to proclaim the gospel. That's just who we are. That's what we're meant to do. And when number 111 reminds us that evangelization is the task of the church. The church is an agent of evangelization. That's what we are made to do. And so it's not just, for those people over there. All of us, all baptized Christians, are meant to evangelize. We are a people advancing on its pilgrimage as we move toward the Lord. And that's what we focus on. So then the next section is a people for everyone. That the primacy of grace is that God initiates, God calls, and then we answer. And it's in that we find our salvation, and that's open to everyone who answers God's call, no matter how. Jesus didn't tell the apostles to go form an elite group of people that he approved of. He called them to go to all nations, no matter where they were. Therefore, church, as a people of God, is the leaven of humanity. We are the ones that lift up who God is within us and around us so that others can see that. A people of many faces, starting on number 116. Whenever community receives a message of salvation from the Holy Spirit, we're then enriched culturally so that we can bring that message into who we are as a people. And that goes with not only generational culture, as each generation kind of has its own cultural ideologies, but also within our ethnic cultures, who we are as a people, who we are as Asian Catholics, Hispanic Catholics, Black Catholics, all the different ethnicities and nationalities that we have within the Catholic Church enhances what we do. And some communities, some communities are going to focus on something different devotionally, and that's perfectly fine. We have a very strong devotion of the Rosary in the Hispanic community, and I believe in the Filipino community as well. That's not to say other communities don't, but it's very prevalent because that came forward out of the Holy Spirit moving through. Italian Catholics will focus on another type of devotion or another place or other feast days. Asian Catholics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of us, through how we were brought up within our families and within our own cultures, have different ways that the Holy Spirit brings that. And that should not separate us. That should, in fact, unite us. A people of many faces, that we can worship together the same liturgy, the same Mass, in our own languages and our own cultural traditions and our own devotions outside of Mass. And that is how God speaks through us. When properly understood, cultural diversity isn't a threat to unity. It's a blessing. And we need to understand that. God builds communication and harmony and creates bonds within us. So we can't demand that people from every continent of the world imitate the same expression of God, of spirituality, as we do. We're all going to do it differently, and that needs to unite us, that we can connect and understand that faith cannot be constricted to the limits of our humanity. Okay, it's got to be the expression and understanding of every culture that we take in. And finally, we are all missionary disciples via baptism. Baptism calls us to evangelize. Baptism makes us missionary disciples. And our personal involvement needs to be active in some way in our church. And as I said, it doesn't have to be in a ministry, but in a connection with community. You know, there's no worse feeling. And I know this as a single person who moved to a whole new area where I knew no one. The worst feeling in the world for me was going to Mass alone that first weekend that I moved to Fresno, not knowing anyone and worshiping in a community where I was not yet connected. And until I found the parish community where I connected, it just wasn't the same. And we all need to do that. So it's not, we don't talk about this activity as about you have to go out there and be a minister and serve here or serve there, but being connected to a community, knowing other people of the faith journey. We're called to mature in our work as evangelizers, is to continually look for ways to grow in our spirituality as witnesses of Christ. Reading books, attending classes, going to workshops, going to diocesan events, even the big masses. You know, we just had Jubilee masses. Those would have been great opportunities to connect with the larger church. But we're all called to do something different, to grow as in how we witness and where we witness. The evangelizing power of popular piety. I'm not going to go really deep into this, but just to know that, again, as people take the message into their culture, we develop our own ways of praising God, and that becomes popular piety, the way that the activity, the way that God works within us, and that we express our praise and thanks to the Lord becomes through our own ways of praising. And the Aparecida document, which was a document that was written in after an event in South America, talks about popular piety as taking the content of the gospel and taking it a step further into the people and how they live and how they grow. So that is my little summary of the first 3 chapters of this document, Evangelii Gaudium. There is a whole section after this that talks about the homily, and I did not go into. I invite you to look in that, especially if you're a deacon watching this or a priest, a member of the clergy. You may want to look at that and see what Pope Francis had to say about missionary discipleship and how that spread in the homily. So I hope this was helpful to you. Next up, you will see the next slide that will show on your screen will be some questions to think about until we meet for our session on discussing this document, which will take place on Monday, February 2nd at 10 a.m. or at 6 p.m. And I will be putting the Zoom link out with this video link so that anyone who'd like to join in the discussion may do so. If you are doing this and you would like to receive ongoing formation hours, please make sure that you either respond to the email that you'll get today, or you email me and let me know, and then I will send you what the requirements are in order to receive credit for this half hour as well as the hour that we will spend in discussion.